The Duke's bargain, she was sold, then she broke every rule. They told her she'd be nothing more than payment, a debt settled, a name salvaged. But the moment Elena Harrow stepped into that storm-battered manor and locked eyes with the man who bought her, she did what no one dared. She refused to bow. Lucien Viremont wasn't just any duke. He was feared, untouchable. And now he was hers to defy. What happens when a woman sold like property decides she won't be owned? Stay until the end to see how she turned chains into a crown. Drop a like and tell us where you're watching from. The carriage hit another rut, and Elena's head knocked against the wooden frame hard enough to rattle her teeth. She didn't flinch. Pain had become background noise over the last 3 days, ever since her father had signed the contract with shaking hands and refused to meet her eyes. "It's for the family," he'd said, voice hollow. "You understand." She understood perfectly. She understood that his gambling debts had finally caught up to him. She understood that the Harrow name, once respected, now whispered about in drawing rooms with pitying shakes of the head, was worth less than the paper it was written on. And she understood that selling his daughter to a duke known for collecting power like other men collected horses was the only card he had left to play. The rain hammered down like fists against the roof. Through the fogged window, Elena caught glimpses of the landscape, dark, twisted trees that seemed to lean away from the road, as if even nature wanted nothing to do with where she was headed. The manor loomed ahead, a sprawling Gothic monstrosity of stone and shadow that looked less like a home and more like a place where hope went to die. The driver hadn't spoken a word since they left the city. When she'd tried to make conversation, anything to break the suffocating silence, he'd just grunted and kept his eyes on the road. She might as well have been a trunk full of china for all the acknowledgement she got. The carriage jerked to a stop. Elena's stomach twisted. This was it, the end of one life, the beginning of another. Except she wasn't walking into a marriage, she was walking into ownership, a transaction. Her father got his debts cleared, his reputation scrubbed clean enough to show his face at his club again. And she got... what? A title? A cold bed in a colder house? The door swung open, and rain immediately soaked the hem of her dress. No footman, no welcoming party, just a stone-faced driver who gestured impatiently for her to get out. She stepped down into the mud, her traveling boots immediately sinking an inch deep. The manor's entrance was at least 50 feet away, across a courtyard that looked like it had been designed specifically to make visitors feel small. Gargoyles leered from the roofline. The windows were dark, except for one, third floor, far left, where a single candle burned. "Your trunks will be brought in," the driver muttered, already climbing back onto his seat. "Wait," Elena started, but he snapped the reins and the carriage lurched away, wheels spraying mud across her skirt. She stood there, alone, rain plastering her hair to her face. For a moment, just a moment, she considered running. Just turning around and walking back down that road, consequences be damned. Let her father drown in his debts. Let the Harrow name die with him. But she'd never been good at running. The front door opened. A woman stood in the doorway, tall, gray-haired, with the kind of face that suggested she'd spent her entire life disapproving of everything she saw. She didn't step out into the rain, just stood there, backlit by the faint glow of the entrance hall, waiting. Elena walked forward. Each step was deliberate. She kept her chin up, shoulders back, even as the rain turned her dress into a sodden, clinging mess. She would not arrive looking defeated. She would not give anyone here the satisfaction. When she reached the door, the woman stepped aside without a word. No greeting, no introduction, just a curt nod toward the interior. The entrance hall was exactly what she'd expected. Oppressive. Dark wood panels climbed the walls. A chandelier hung from the vaulted ceiling, but only a few candles were lit, casting more shadow than light. A staircase swept upward into darkness. The air smelled of old money and older secrets. "Dry yourself," the woman said, producing a towel that looked like it had last been washed during the previous century. "His Grace is waiting." "His Grace," Elena repeated, taking the towel and making no move to use it. "Does His Grace have a name? Or should I just curtsy to shadows and hope I'm facing the right direction?" The woman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or warning. The Duke of Viremont does not appreciate impertinence. Then he's going to have a very difficult time with me. She handed the towel back, still dripping. The woman's mouth thinned into a line that could have cut glass, but she said nothing, just turned and started walking, clearly expecting Elena to follow. They moved through a series of corridors that all looked the same. More dark wood, more shadows, more of that oppressive silence that made Elena want to scream just to prove she could still make noise. Finally, they stopped in front of a set of double doors. The woman knocked once, sharp and efficient. "Enter." The voice from inside was low, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command a room. The doors opened. The study was different from the rest of the manor, smaller, more intimate, but no less intimidating. Books lined 3 walls from floor to ceiling. A fire crackled in the hearth, the only source of warmth Elena had felt since arriving. And behind a massive desk, backlit by that fire so his face was cast in shadow, sat the Duke of Viremont. Lucien Viremont, the man who'd bought her. He didn't stand, didn't acknowledge her immediately, just continued writing something in a ledger, his hand moving with precise, measured strokes. The silence stretched. Elena knew what this was, a power play. Make her wait. Make her feel small. Make her remember her place. She stepped forward without being invited and walked right up to the desk. "I assume you're the one who purchased me," she said, voice cutting through the quiet. "Should I be grateful? Should I curtsy? Or should we skip the theater and get to the part where you tell me what you expect from your new acquisition?" The pen stopped moving. Slowly, Lucien Viremont looked up, and Elena forgot how to breathe. He wasn't what she'd expected. The rumors had painted him as older, crueler, a man who'd earned his reputation through ruthlessness alone. But the man looking at her couldn't have been more than 30. Dark hair, severe features, and eyes that were the color of winter ice, cold, assessing, and sharp enough to cut. He set the pen down with deliberate care. "You're late," he said. No inflection, just fact. "Your driver seemed to enjoy every rut in the road. I assume that was intentional." It was. "Testing me already?" "Observing." He leaned back in his chair, those pale eyes never leaving her face. Elena refused to look away. She'd spent her entire life being told to lower her gaze, soften her voice, make herself smaller so men like him could feel bigger. She was done with that. "You're aware of why you're here," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm aware that my father's cowardice and your money have resulted in this arrangement." "Arrangement," he repeated, something that might have been amusement flickering across his features. An interesting word for a marriage. Marriage implies choice. This is a transaction. "Yes," he agreed, and there was no pretense in his voice. It is." The honesty was somehow worse than lies would have been. At least lies would have given her something to push against. This cold acknowledgement of exactly what she was to him left her with nothing. "I have 3 rules," Lucien said, rising from his chair. He was tall, easily 6 feet, and moved with the kind of controlled grace that suggested violence was always an option, just not a necessary one yet. 1. You will not embarrass me in public. 2. You will not interfere with my business. 3. You will not ask questions about matters that don't concern you. He circled the desk, stopping a few feet away from her, close enough that she could see the thin scar running along his jaw, close enough that she could smell leather and smoke and something darker underneath. "Do you understand?" Elena met his gaze directly. "Perfectly. Now here are mine." She took a step closer, refusing to give ground. 1. I'm not property, and I won't be treated as such. 2. If you expect obedience, you'll be disappointed. 3. I will never be afraid of you. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, impossibly, one corner of Lucien's mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one, there and gone so fast she might have imagined it. "Mrs. Godfrey," he called, not taking his eyes off Elena. The gray-haired woman appeared in the doorway. "Show Miss Harrow," he paused. "Show the Duchess to her rooms. She'll need dry clothes and a meal." "I'm not hungry," Elena said, because agreeing with him felt like losing. "You will eat anyway." He returned to his desk, picking up the pen again. "We have a public appearance tomorrow evening. The magistrate's dinner. You'll need to be presentable." "Presentable," she echoed, "like a prize horse." "If you prefer the comparison." The dismissal was clear. Mrs. Godfrey was already gesturing toward the door, but Elena didn't move. "One more thing." Lucien looked up, and this time there was definite irritation in his expression. "Good. If we're going to play at being married," Elena said, "at least have the courtesy to look at me when you speak. I'm standing right here." For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he stood, slowly and closed the distance between them until they were barely a foot apart. "You want my attention?" His voice dropped, soft and dangerous. "You have it, but be careful what you ask for. Most people in this house have learned it's safer to be invisible." "I've never been good at safe." "No," he said quietly, studying her face like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "I'm beginning to see that." He stepped back and the moment broke. "Mrs. Godfrey will see to your needs. We'll discuss expectations in the morning." This time, when the housekeeper gestured, Elena followed, but she looked back once before leaving the study. Lucien had returned to his work, the firelight casting shadows across his face, and she wondered, not for the first time, what kind of man she'd just bound herself to. Her rooms were on the second floor, at the end of a long hallway that seemed designed to make her feel as far from everyone else as possible. Mrs. Godfrey opened the door and stood aside. "Dinner will be brought up within the hour. If you need anything, pull the cord by the bed." "Thank you." The housekeeper paused, something almost like concern crossing her weathered features. "A word of advice, Your Grace. His Grace is not a man who tolerates defiance well. Then he shouldn't have bought someone who doesn't know how to bow." Mrs. Godfrey's lips pressed together, but she said nothing else. Just closed the door, leaving Elena alone for the first time since arriving. The room was fine. Better than fine, actually. A large four-poster bed dominated one wall. A fireplace, already lit, provided warmth. Heavy curtains framed windows that looked out over the dark grounds. There was even a small sitting area with 2 chairs and a table. It was a gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. Elena walked to the window and pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Outside, the storm had picked up, rain lashing against the manor like it was trying to break in, or maybe trying to break her out. She thought about her father, probably celebrating his restored fortunes with brandy and cards. She thought about her mother, dead 5 years now, who would have fought tooth and nail to prevent this. She thought about the life she'd imagined for herself. Small, maybe, but hers, and how it had evaporated the moment her father's creditors came calling. And she thought about the man downstairs, with his ice-cold eyes and his 3 rules and the way he'd looked at her like she was something unexpected, something dangerous. The door opened without a knock, and a maid hurried in with a tray. She set it on the table, curtsied without making eye contact, and practically ran out again. Elena looked at the food, roasted chicken, vegetables, bread that was still warm. Her stomach growled despite her earlier claim of not being hungry. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, and that had been stale bread and weak tea in a roadside inn. She ate mechanically, barely tasting anything. Her mind was already working, already planning. If she was going to survive in this place, if she was going to be more than just another one of Lucien Viermont's possessions, she needed to understand him, understand what he wanted, what he feared, what drove a man to buy a wife instead of courting one. The rumors about him were extensive and contradictory. Some said he'd killed a man in a duel over an insult. Others claimed he ran an underground network of informants and spies. There were whispers about his father's suspicious death, about business deals that ruined rivals overnight, about women who came to the manor and were never seen again. But rumors were just stories people told themselves to make sense of things they didn't understand. Elena needed facts. She needed to know who she was up against, because despite everything, despite the fear coiling in her gut, despite the very real possibility that she'd just walked into something far more dangerous than a loveless marriage, Elena felt something else, something she hadn't felt in months. She felt alive. The challenge had been set, the battle lines drawn, and for the first time since her father had told her she was being sold, Elena Harrow felt like herself again. She finished eating, changed into the nightgown that had been laid out on the bed, and climbed under the covers. The bed was soft, the room warm, and outside the storm raged on. Sleep didn't come easily. Every sound made her tense, footsteps in the hallway, doors closing, the wind howling against the windows. This place felt wrong. Not evil exactly, but watchful, like the house itself was waiting to see what she would do. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were full of pale eyes and shadows, and the feeling of standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to decide whether to step back or jump. Morning came too soon and too bright. Someone had opened the curtains while she slept, and sunlight streamed through the windows with aggressive cheerfulness. Elena groaned and pulled the covers over her head. "Good morning, Your Grace." She bolted upright. A different maid stood by the fireplace, younger than the one from last night, with red hair and freckles and an expression that suggested she was trying very hard not to look terrified. "I'm Annie, Your Grace. Mrs. Godfrey sent me to help you dress. His Grace requests your presence for breakfast in 30 minutes. "Requests," Elena muttered, throwing off the covers. "I'm sure he did." Annie's eyes widened. "Your Grace, it's fine. I'm not going to bite." Elena stood, stretching. Her body ached from days of travel and a night of fitful sleep. "What's breakfast protocol here? Do we eat in silence while he reads the paper, or do we pretend to be a happy couple?" I don't know, Your Grace. His Grace usually eats alone." Of course he did. Annie helped her into a day dress. Simple, elegant, dark blue. It fit perfectly, which meant someone had taken her measurements without asking. The thought made Elena's skin crawl, but she pushed it aside. Pick your battles. 28 minutes later, she walked into the breakfast room. Lucien was already there, seated at the head of a table that could have fit 20 people. He looked up when she entered, and for just a second, something crossed his face. Surprise, maybe, that she'd actually come. "Good morning," she said, choosing a seat at the opposite end of the table. If they were going to be absurd about this, she might as well commit. His jaw tightened. "The seat to my right is customary for—" "I'm comfortable here, thank you." A servant appeared, looking between them with obvious panic. Elena felt almost sorry for the poor man. "Almost. Coffee?" she said. "And whatever you're serving." The meal passed in tense silence. Lucien read through correspondence, occasionally making notes. Elena ate scrambled eggs and studied the room. More dark wood, more oppressive decoration, more of that sense that this house existed to remind everyone in it how small they were. "The magistrate's dinner is at 7, Lucien said finally, not looking up from his papers. "We'll leave at 6:30. Wear something appropriate." "I didn't bring a wardrobe suitable for entertaining minor nobility." "I'm aware. A selection will be brought to your room this afternoon." "How thoughtful. You've already got my measurements. Why not my dress size too?" He set down his papers and looked at her directly. "Is there a point to your antagonism, or is this simply who you are?" "I haven't decided yet. I'll let you know." Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. Or maybe she was imagining it. It was hard to tell with him. Every expression was controlled, measured, revealed only what he wanted to reveal. "The magistrate is an influential man," Lucien said. "His good opinion matters for business. Tonight, you will smile. You will be charming. You will play the role of a devoted wife who is thrilled with her advantageous marriage. Can you do that?" Elena set down her fork. "I can play whatever role you need, but I want something in return." "You're in no position to negotiate, aren't I? You need a wife who doesn't embarrass you. I need my freedom. We can make that work for both of us." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those cold eyes. "What kind of freedom?" "Access to the library, the grounds, the right to come and go as I please during the day. And I want my own accounts. Enough money that I'm not dependent on you for every penny. Absolutely not. Absolutely." "Then I hope you enjoy explaining to the magistrate why your new bride looks like she's attending a funeral instead of a dinner party." The silence stretched. Elena kept her expression neutral, even though her heart was hammering. This was a risk, pushing him this far, this soon. But if she didn't establish boundaries now, she never would. "The library and grounds, yes," Lucien said finally. "Limited funds for personal expenses, but you don't leave the estate without informing me first. And you attend every social function I require without complaint." It wasn't everything, but it was more than she'd had yesterday. "Deal." "You're very certain of yourself." "Someone has to be." He almost smiled. Almost. Then he stood, gathering his papers. "I have business in town. I'll return by 5. Be ready at 6:30. He was at the door when Elena spoke again. "Lucien." He stopped, turned. She'd used his first name deliberately, testing another boundary. "Why did you agree to this? You could have any woman you wanted. Why buy a bride you've never met?" For a long moment, she didn't think he would answer. Then, "Because wanting and needing are different things. I don't need a love match. I need someone who won't bore me." "And you think I won't bore you?" "We'll see." He left, and Elena sat alone at the absurdly long table, surrounded by expensive china and heavy silver and all the trappings of wealth that felt more like a trap than a privilege. But she'd won something today. Small, maybe, but real. And tomorrow, she'd win something else. because Elena Harrow had been traded to save a name she never wanted. But she'd be damned if she let that define her. She would survive this. She would thrive.
And maybe, just maybe, she'd figure out what was really going on in this dark manor, with its cold master and its watching shadows. Whatever secrets Lucien Viermont was hiding, she was going to uncover them, even if it killed her.
The dresses arrived at 3 o'clock, carried in by 2 maids who looked like they were transporting explosives rather than silk and satin. They laid them across the bed, 6 gowns, each more elaborate than the last, in colors ranging from deep emerald to midnight blue to a burgundy so dark it was nearly black. Elena stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching Annie fuss over the fabrics like they were newborn puppies.
His Grace has excellent taste, Annie said, running her fingers over the emerald silk. This one would look beautiful with your coloring, Your Grace. His Grace can have excellent taste all he wants. I'll wear what I choose. She walked past the bed without looking at any of them and went straight to the wardrobe where her own clothes had been unpacked. Most of it was travel-worn, practical, nothing that would impress anyone at a magistrate's dinner. But there was one dress, the one her mother had given her 3 years ago, before the illness took her. Simple gray silk with minimal embellishment, but well made, elegant in its restraint. Your Grace, Annie said carefully, perhaps one of these would be more... I'm wearing my mother's dress. Annie's mouth opened, closed, opened again. But His Grace specifically requested I look appropriate. This is appropriate.
Elena pulled the gray dress from the wardrobe. Unless you think his pride is worth more than my mother's memory? The question hung in the air like a threat. Annie backed down immediately, as Elena knew she would. Servants in houses like this learned quickly not to push too hard. By 6:15, Elena was dressed and ready. The gray silk fit perfectly. Her mother had been almost exactly her size. She'd pinned her hair up simply, added the only jewelry she owned, a thin silver chain that had been her grandmother's, and looked at herself in the mirror with something approaching satisfaction. She looked like herself, not like some doll Lucien Viermont had dressed up to show off. The knock came at exactly 6:25. Your Grace, the carriage is ready. Elena took a breath, smoothed her skirt, and opened the door on Mrs. Godfrey stood in the hallway, and her expression, normally so carefully neutral, cracked just slightly when she saw what Elena was wearing. His Grace is waiting downstairs. Then let's not keep him. Lucien was in the entrance hall, dressed in black with a silver waistcoat that probably cost more than her father's annual income used to be. He was checking his pocket watch when she descended the stairs, and he looked up at the sound of her footsteps. His face went completely still. That's not one of the dresses I sent. No, Elena agreed, reaching the bottom step. It's not. You specifically asked me to look appropriate. I do. She met his gaze directly. Unless you'd prefer I wear someone else's idea of who I should be. A muscle in his jaw twitched. For a moment she thought he might actually send her back upstairs to change. Then he turned on his heel and walked toward the door. The carriage! Now! She followed, and the cold night air hit her like a slap. The coach was smaller than the one that had brought her here. Elegant, clearly expensive, with the Viermont crest painted on the door. A footman stood ready, but Lucien waved him off and handed Elena in himself. The gesture was courteous. His grip on her hand was not. The door closed, and they were alone in the confined space. Lucien sat across from her, those pale eyes reflecting the lamplight, and said nothing. The silence was deliberate, oppressive, meant to make her squirm. Elena looked out the window instead. They were 5 minutes down the road when he finally spoke. You're going to be difficult, aren't you? I'm going to be honest. If that's difficult for you, that's not my problem. Everything you do reflects on me. Your choices are my reputation. Then maybe you shouldn't have bought a wife sight unseen. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she didn't take them back. This was the reality, wasn't it? He'd purchased her like livestock, and now he was upset she wasn't performing as expected. You agreed to be charming tonight, Lucien said, voice dangerously quiet. You agreed to play the devoted wife. And I will, but not in someone else's dress. Why does it matter? Because it's mine. She turned to look at him directly. Because every single thing in your house belongs to you, was chosen by you, exists because you allow it. This dress is the only thing I own that you didn't give me. So yes, it matters. Something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, but a flicker of something that might have been understanding, or calculation. With him, it was impossible to tell. The magistrate's wife is a vicious gossip, he said finally. She'll notice you're not wearing new clothes. She'll comment on it. Let her. And when she asks why the Duke of Viramont's new bride is wearing a dress that's 3 seasons old, I'll tell her it belonged to my mother and has more value than anything money could buy. Lucian studied her for a long moment. You're either very brave or very stupid. I've been called both. The carriage hit a bump, throwing Elena slightly to the side. She caught herself on the window frame, and when she looked back, Lucien was still watching her with that unsettling intensity. There are people at this dinner who would use any weakness against me, he said. Any hint that our marriage is anything less than solid will be exploited. Then we'd better put on a good show. This isn't a game. No, Elena agreed. It's survival, and I'm very good at surviving. The magistrate's house was smaller than Lucian's manor, but no less pretentious. All white stone and columns and manicured gardens that probably required an army of gardeners. Carriages lined the circular drive, and well-dressed couples were being ushered inside by servants in matching livery. Lucien stepped out first, then offered his hand to help Elena down. This time his grip was gentle, controlled. Performance mode activated. Remember, he murmured, close enough that his breath ghosted across her ear. Devoted wife. Can you manage that? Watch me. They walked up the steps together, and Elena felt every eye in the place turned toward them. Whispers started immediately. She caught fragments as they passed. Finally married. Heard he bought her father's debts. She kept her expression serene, her hand light on Lucien's arm. This was the game, then. Let them whisper. Let them judge. She'd been judged her entire life for things outside her control. The entrance hall was packed with people pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. A portly man with mutton chop whiskers and a face like an overripe tomato bustled toward them, arms outstretched. Viramont, delighted you could make it, and this must be the new Duchess. Magistrate Thornbury, Lucien said smoothly. May I present my wife, Elena? Elena curtsied. A pleasure. The pleasure is entirely mine, Your Grace. Thornbury's eyes were doing that thing men's eyes did, cataloging, assessing, pricing. We were all so surprised when we heard about your sudden marriage. Viramont here has been dodging matrimony for years. Some things are worth waiting for, Lucien said, and his hand settled at the small of Elena's back. Possessive, claiming. She wanted to shove it off. Instead, she smiled. I consider myself fortunate. As you should, as you should. Now come, come. Dinner will be served shortly, but first you must meet everyone. My wife has been dying to make your acquaintance. He shepherded them deeper into the crowd, and Elena felt the weight of dozens of stares. Women in elaborate gowns that probably cost what a working family earned in a year. Men with perfectly tailored coats and carefully cultivated expressions of boredom. Everyone performing their own version of civility while privately calculating who had the most power in the room. Lady Viramont! A woman materialized in front of them, tall, thin, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. This had to be Mrs. Thornbury. She was wearing enough jewelry to fund a small country, and her dress was so heavily embroidered it probably required structural support. Mrs. Thornbury, Elena said, what a lovely home. Oh, you're too kind, though I must say I expected... She paused, gaze raking over Elena's simple dress. Something a bit more formal. For your debut, I mean. There it was, first strike. I prefer understated elegance, Elena said smoothly. Fashion changes, but good taste is timeless. Don't you agree? Mrs. Thornbury's smile froze. Score 1 for the new Duchess. How refreshing, the older woman managed. So few young people today understand restraint. Tell me, how did you and Viramont meet? The announcement was so sudden, we heard almost nothing. Love rarely follows a schedule, Elena said, and she felt Lucian's hand tighten slightly on her back. Warning or approval, she couldn't tell. Love, Mrs. Thornbury repeated, and something hungry entered her expression. How romantic. Though, of course, we all heard about your father's difficulties. Such a relief that everything worked out so advantageously for your family. The room had gone quieter. People were listening now, barely pretending otherwise. This was a test. A very public test. Mrs. Thornbury was digging for scandal, for confirmation of what everyone already suspected, that this was a business arrangement. that Elena had been sold to clear debts, that Lucien Viremont had bought himself a wife the way other men bought horses. Elena could feel Lucien waiting to see how she'd respond, could feel everyone waiting. She smiled directly at Mrs. Thornberry. "Families help each other through hard times," she said. "That's what families do. My husband was generous enough to assist mine when we needed it most. I hardly think that's something to be ashamed of." "Oh, of course not. I didn't mean—" "And as for timing," Elena continued, voice pleasant but sharp underneath, "when you know you found what you want, why wait? Life's too short for endless courtship, don't you think? Better to claim what's yours and move forward." She leaned slightly into Lucien as she said it, playing the role of besotted newlywed. His hand stayed where it was, steady pressure against her spine. Mrs. Thornberry looked like she'd bitten into something sour. "Well, yes, quite." "If you'll excuse us," Lucien said smoothly, "I see Counselor Morris. I've been meaning to speak with him about the new trade agreements." He guided Elena away, and the crowd parted for them like water around stone. Once they were out of immediate earshot, he leaned down and murmured, "Not bad. I told you I could play the part. The question is whether you can maintain it all evening. Try me." Dinner was exactly as tedious as Elena had expected. She was seated between a banker who talked exclusively about interest rates and a lord who seemed more interested in his wine than conversation. Lucien was several seats away, deep in discussion with the magistrate and two other men about something that required a lot of serious nodding and furrowed brows. Across the table, she caught Mrs. Thornberry watching her. When their eyes met, the older woman smiled, the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse right before pouncing. The meal dragged on, course after course of food that tasted like money, but not much else. Elena answered questions when asked, laughed politely at jokes that weren't funny, and counted the minutes until this performance would be over. It was during dessert that things went wrong. A young man, couldn't have been more than 25, with the kind of face that suggested he'd never heard the word no in his life, leaned across the table toward Elena. "So, Your Grace," he said, voice carrying just slightly too well, "tell us, what's it like being married to the infamous Duke of Viremont? Do you find him as cold in private as he is in public?" The table went silent. Elena set down her fork very carefully. "I find him to be exactly what I need." How diplomatic. The young man, someone had called him Whitmore earlier, grinned. "But surely you've heard the rumors. About what happened to his father? About the business rivals who mysteriously lose everything after crossing him?" "Whitmore," one of the older men said sharply. "That's enough. I'm only making conversation. The new Duchess should know what kind of family she's married into, shouldn't she?" Elena felt more than saw Lucien's attention snap toward them. The air in the room changed, became heavier somehow. Dangerous. "I know exactly what family I married into," Elena said, voice calm but cold. "The question is whether you know the consequences of insulting it." Whitmore laughed. Actually laughed. "Is that a threat? From you?" "It's a fact. You just publicly questioned my husband's character at a dinner party. That's not boldness, Mr. Whitmore. That's stupidity." "Elena." Lucien's voice cut across the room. He was standing now, and something in his expression made Elena's breath catch. This was the man the rumors talked about. Controlled violence, barely leashed. "We're leaving," he said flatly. "But the dinner isn't—" Mrs. Thornberry started. "Now." He didn't wait for Elena, just turned and walked toward the door, clearly expecting her to follow. The room was absolutely silent except for the sound of his boots on the marble floor. Elena stood, nodded to Mrs. Thornberry, and followed her husband out. The carriage ride back was worse than the one there. Lucien sat in rigid silence, jaw clenched, staring out the window like he could set the landscape on fire through sheer force of will. Elena waited, knowing the explosion was coming. It came the moment they were back at the manor. Lucien stormed into the entrance hall, and Elena barely had time to close the door before he rounded on her. "What the hell was that?" "That was me defending you. I don't need you to defend me." "Clearly you do, because you were just going to let him embarrass himself?" "Yes!" Lucien's voice was tight with fury. "Do you understand what you've done? Whitmore is connected to half the merchant families in the county. His uncle sits on the trade council, and you just told him the truth. That he was being an idiot. You made an enemy. He was already an enemy." Elena threw her hands up. Everyone in that room was looking for weakness, looking for proof that this marriage is exactly what they think it is.
I wasn't going to give them that. So instead, you gave them something worse, proof that you can't control your temper. My temper? She laughed, sharp and bitter. You're the one who walked out of a dinner party like a child having a tantrum. The silence that followed was absolute. Lucian took a step toward her, and Elena's back hit the wall. She hadn't realized she'd been backing away. You don't know anything about my business, he said, voice deadly quiet. You don't know what alliances I'm trying to build, what enemies I'm trying to avoid. You swan into a dinner party in your dead mother's dress, make a scene, and then wonder why I'm angry? I made a scene. He was the one, and you should have ignored him, should have smiled and changed the subject and let him look like the fool he is. Lucian slammed his hand against the wall beside her head, and Elena flinched despite herself. But no, you had to prove something, had to show everyone you're not afraid of me. I'm not afraid of you. Then you're an idiot. They were inches apart now, close enough that Elena could see the thin scar on his jaw in detail, could count the shades of gray in his eyes. Close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him, fury, and something else underneath. You want me afraid? She whispered. You want me docile and obedient and performing for your business associates like a trained dog? Then you bought the wrong woman. I'm starting to realize that. Send me back then. Dissolve the marriage. Tell my father the deal's off. I can't. Why not? Because he stopped, jaw working like he was physically restraining the words. Then quieter. Because it's done. Because breaking the contract now would be worse than keeping it. Because... He pushed off the wall and turned away, running a hand through his hair hard enough to pull. Elena's heart was hammering. Her hands were shaking. This was it, the moment where everything either broke or bent. You said you didn't need a love match, she said to his back. You said you needed someone who wouldn't bore you. Well, here I am, not boring you. Is this what you wanted? Lucian laughed, short and humorless. I don't know what I wanted, but it wasn't this. This being you. He turned back around and the look on his face was complicated. Anger and frustration and something that might have been regret. You're supposed to be simple. A transaction. A necessary alliance. But you won't stay in the box I made for you. Then maybe stop trying to fit me in a box. It's not that easy. Why not? Because if you're not property, if you're not just another asset I control, then... He stopped again, and this time he looked away entirely. Then I have to actually care what happens to you, and that's dangerous. The admission hung between them like a confession. Elena took a breath, trying to sort through what she was feeling. Anger, still, frustration, but also something else, a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the man underneath the Duke. What if I don't need you to protect me? She said quietly. What if I can take care of myself? You can't. You don't know that. I know this world. Lucian met her eyes again, and there was something raw in his expression. I know what men like Whitmore are capable of when they think they've been insulted. I know what enemies do to people He stopped. To people associated with me. Is that what I am? Associated? What else would you call it? I don't know, Elena said honestly. But maybe we could figure it out together instead of you dictating terms and me rebelling against them. Lucian studied her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he almost smiled. You really don't know when to back down, do you? Not usually, no. That's going to get you killed. Maybe. But at least I'll die as myself. He shook his head, but there was less anger in it now, more resignation. What am I supposed to do with you? Try treating me like a person. See how that goes. I'm not good at that. I noticed. The tension in the room had shifted, still present, but different somehow. Less explosive. More complicated. The library access you wanted, Lucian said finally. You have it. Full access. And I'll arrange an account in your name by the end of the week. Elena blinked. Why? Because you were right. About the dress. About needing something that's yours. He turned toward the stairs, clearly done with this conversation. But Elena? Yes? If you make another enemy at a public event, I will personally lock you in your room until you learn to behave. Are we clear? Crystal. He started up the stairs, then paused halfway and looked back. And for what it's worth, Mrs. Thornberry deserved that comment about good taste. Her dress looked like a drowned peacock. Then he was gone.
disappearing into the shadows of the upper floor, and Elena was left alone in the entrance hall, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. She'd won something tonight, lost something else. The battle lines were clearer now, but also more blurred. Lucien wasn't the simple villain the rumors made him out to be. He was complicated, damaged, trying to control everything because what? Because he'd lost control of something important once? Elena climbed the stairs slowly, her mind already working. She had library access now, which meant information, which meant power. If she was going to survive in this house, in this marriage, she needed to understand what she was really dealing with. Why Lucien needed this alliance so badly, what enemies he was fighting, what he was so determined to protect, and maybe, just maybe, why the thought of her getting hurt seemed to genuinely disturb him. Her room was dark when she entered. She lit a candle and started undoing the pins in her hair, watching her reflection in the mirror. The gray dress suddenly felt heavier than it had all evening, weighted with more than just memory. Tomorrow, she'd start in the library. Tomorrow, she'd begin piecing together the real story of Lucien Viermont and his carefully guarded empire. But tonight, she stood at her window and looked out at the dark grounds, at the shadows that seemed to move in the moonlight, and wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Or if she'd finally found something worth fighting for. The knock on her door came so softly she almost missed it. Yes? It opened a crack, and Annie peered in. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Your Grace, but Mrs. Godfrey asked me to tell you something." "What?" Annie glanced behind her nervously, then stepped inside and closed the door. "She said you should know Mr. Whitmore's family owns half the warehouses at the port. His uncle controls most of the shipping contracts. And after tonight—" She trailed off, worrying her lower lip. "After tonight, they're going to be a problem," Elena finished. "His Grace has enemies, Your Grace, powerful ones, and they'll use anything, anyone, to hurt him." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Mrs. Godfrey said you seem like the kind of person who'd rather know the truth than be protected from it." Annie curtsied quickly. "Good night, Your Grace." She left, and Elena was alone again with her thoughts and her candle and the growing certainty that she'd just stumbled into something far more dangerous than a loveless marriage. Somewhere in the house, a door closed. Footsteps moved across the floor above her. The manor settled into its nighttime rhythms, all creaks and whispers and watching darkness. And Elena Harrow, Duchess of Viermont, stood at the center of it all and felt the trap close a little tighter. She couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old manor sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind against the windows felt like a warning. Elena lay in bed, staring at the ceiling until the first gray light of dawn crept through the curtains, then gave up entirely and got dressed. The library was on the ground floor, tucked into the east wing where morning light would flood through tall windows. At least, that's what Mrs. Godfrey had said when Elena asked. She found it easily enough. A set of heavy oak doors that opened onto a room that took her breath away. Books everywhere. Floor to ceiling, wall to wall, leather-bound spines in every color imaginable. Ladders on rails for reaching the higher shelves. Reading chairs positioned near the fireplace. A massive desk in the center covered in papers and ledgers that someone had been working through recently. Elena walked to the nearest shelf and ran her fingers along the spines. History, philosophy, law, poetry. A collection that had been built over generations, not purchased for show. "You're up early." She spun around. Lucien stood in the doorway, dressed for riding in dark trousers and a coat that had seen actual use rather than just display. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there last night. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Neither could I." He walked to the desk and started gathering papers into organized stacks. "I'm writing to the port this morning, meeting with the harbor master about the new tariff schedules." "Because of what happened last night?" It wasn't a question. Lucien glanced up, and something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Whitmore's uncle controls the tariff committee. If he decides to make things difficult, it could cost me thousands. So yes, because of last night." "I'm sorry." "Are you?" Elena considered lying, then decided against it. "No, not really. He was being an ass." Lucien laughed, short and surprised, like he hadn't meant to. "He was, but that's not the point." "What is the point?" "The point is learning which battles are worth fighting." He finished organizing the papers and looked at her directly. "You'll have free run of the library while I'm gone. Most of these books are harmless. Some are not. Use your judgment." "What makes a book not harmless?" "The ones with detailed financial records of people who might want me dead." He said it so casually, like discussing the weather.
There's a section behind the desk, third shelf from the bottom. I'd prefer you didn't read those yet. Yet? You're clever enough to piece things together eventually. I'd rather control when that happens. He headed for the door, then paused. Elena, don't leave the house today. Stay inside. Stay visible to the staff. Can you do that? Why? Because I asked you to. That's not an answer. Lucian's jaw tightened. Because when you publicly humiliate a man like Whitmore, he doesn't forget. And while I'm gone, you're vulnerable. So please, for once, just do what I ask without arguing. He left before she could respond, and Elena was alone with thousands of books and a growing sense that she'd stepped into something far more dangerous than a simple arranged marriage. She spent the morning reading, started with innocuous things, history texts, poetry collections, a fascinating book on agricultural reform, but her eyes kept drifting to that third shelf behind the desk, the one she wasn't supposed to touch yet. By noon, her curiosity won. The ledgers were exactly what Lucian had warned about. Financial records going back years, documenting business deals and partnerships, and occasionally their violent ends. She found entries for companies that no longer existed, men whose names she recognized from obituaries, payments marked settlement, that were clearly something else entirely. One name appeared repeatedly, Corvus Trading Company, and every entry associated with them was marked in red ink. Your Grace? Elena jumped, nearly dropping the ledger. Annie stood in the doorway with a lunch tray, looking apologetic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. Mrs. Godfrey thought you might want something to eat. Thank you. Elena closed the ledger quickly, but not quickly enough. Annie's eyes had already seen it. Your Grace, perhaps you should what? Stay ignorant? Annie set the tray down carefully. His Grace has enemies, dangerous ones. The less you know, the safer you are. Or the more vulnerable I am because I don't see threats coming. The maid bit her lip, clearly torn between loyalty to the household and something else. Maybe pity for the new Duchess, who had no idea what she'd married into. Corvus Trading? Elena said quietly. What is it? I can't. Annie, please. If I'm in danger, I need to know why. The girl looked toward the door, then back at Elena. They used to be his Grace's partners. Years ago, before his father died, there was a dispute over, I don't know exactly what, but it ended badly. 3 of their board members died in what they called accidents. Corvus blamed his Grace. Did he do it? I don't know, Your Grace, but they've been trying to ruin him ever since. Buy out his contracts, steal his clients, spread rumors. It's been going on for 5 years. And now they know he has a wife. Annie nodded miserably. Now they have leverage. The word settled like lead in Elena's stomach. Leverage. That's what she was. A weakness to exploit, a pressure point to push. You should eat something, Annie said gently, and maybe stay away from those ledgers. His Grace wouldn't want you worrying. She left, and Elena stared at the closed book in front of her. She should put it back, should eat her lunch and read something safe, and wait for Lucienne to return like a good, obedient wife. Instead, she opened the ledger again and kept reading. The afternoon wore on. Elena moved through years of records, piecing together a story that was far uglier than she'd expected. Lucienne's father had been involved in something, smuggling, maybe, or worse. And when he died suddenly, fell down the stairs, the official report said, the partnership with Corvus had dissolved into open warfare. Lucian had won most of the battles, but Corvus was still out there, still looking for an opening, and now they had one. The sun was setting when Elena heard the commotion outside. Raised voices, the clatter of hooves on stone, doors slamming. She went to the window and saw Lucien dismounting in the courtyard, his face set in hard lines. Another man was with him, older, gray-haired, gesturing angrily. Their voices carried up through the open window. Can't just ignore this, Viramont. They've blocked 3 of your shipments this week alone. I'm handling it, Morrison. How? By sitting in your manor while they strangle your business? The gray-haired man, Morrison, laughed bitterly. You should never have married, given them exactly what they wanted, a target. Elena stepped back from the window, heart pounding. So it wasn't just her imagination. She really was a liability. Dinner that evening was tense. Lucien barely spoke, just pushed food around his plate while his expression grew darker. Elena waited until the servants cleared the main course before breaking the silence. I read the ledgers. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. I told you not to. You said to use my judgment. I did. And? And now I understand why you told me to stay inside today. Elena met his eyes across the table. Corvus Trading wants to destroy you, and they think I'm the way to do it. Well, Lucien set down his fork very carefully. You shouldn't have read those. Too late. I did. And now I want to know, are we actually in danger, or are you just being paranoid? Both. The honesty surprised her. Lucien stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark grounds with his hands clasped behind his back. 3 years ago, they tried to have me arrested for fraud. It didn't stick. 2 years ago, they burned down one of my warehouses, killed 2 workers. We couldn't prove it was them. Last year, they bought out half my suppliers and tripled their prices. He turned back to face her. They won't stop until I'm ruined or dead. And yes, now that you're here, you're part of that equation. So what do we do? We? He raised an eyebrow. There is no we in this, Elena. You stay safe, stay out of sight, and let me handle it. That's your plan? Hide your wife away like a shameful secret? That's my plan to keep you alive. I didn't ask to be kept alive. I asked what we're going to do about the people trying to destroy us. There is no us. The words came out harsh, louder than he'd probably intended. Lucien took a breath, clearly trying to regain control. You're my responsibility, my burden to carry, but you are not my partner in this fight. Elena stood slowly. Then what am I? He stopped, jaw working. You're what I agreed to protect when I signed that contract with your father. Nothing more. Liar? The word hung between them like a challenge. Lucien's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You heard me. You're lying. If I was really just an obligation, you wouldn't care whether I read those ledgers. You wouldn't worry about me making enemies at dinner parties. You wouldn't have given me library access and my own funds. Elena took a step closer. So either admit that I matter to you or stop pretending this is just business. It is just business. Then why are you so afraid? I'm not. You are. I can see it. You're terrified that something's going to happen to me and you won't be able to stop it. That's not business, Lucien. The window exploded inward. Glass sprayed across the dining room as something heavy crashed through. Elena threw her arms up instinctively, felt a sharp sting as a shard caught her forearm. Someone was shouting. Lucien, she realized distantly. And then he was there grabbing her, pulling her down behind the table as more glass shattered. Stay down! Elena's ears were ringing. She looked at the floor where the object had landed. A brick wrapped in paper. The paper was on fire. Lucien moved fast, grabbing the brick and throwing it into the fireplace before the flames could spread. Then he was back at Elena's side, checking her for injuries with hands that shook slightly. Are you hurt? My arm. It's nothing. Just a cut. Let me see. He pushed up her sleeve, and his expression went very still at the sight of the blood running down her arm. It wasn't deep, but it was long, and it was hers. Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Mrs. Godfrey burst in, followed by 2 footmen, all of them armed with... Were those pistols? Search the grounds, Lucien ordered, his voice completely calm now, cold. Find whoever did this. Bring them to me alive. The footman ran out. Mrs. Godfrey approached with bandages already in hand, clearly prepared for exactly this kind of emergency. How bad? She asked. Surface cut. She'll be fine. Lucien wrapped Elena's arm with efficiency that suggested he'd done this before. But we need to move her, now. They know which room... Another window shattered, this one in the entrance hall. Then another, upstairs. The sound of breaking glass filled the manor like a symphony of violence. The safe room, Mrs. Godfrey said. We have to get her to the safe room. There's a safe room? Elena asked, somewhat hysterically. Lucien pulled her to her feet. Yes, and we're going there now. Can you run? Yes, I think. Then run. They ran. Through corridors Elena barely recognized, down a staircase she'd never seen before, into what looked like a wine cellar but wasn't. Lucien pulled a specific bottle, and part of the wall swung inward, revealing a hidden room beyond. It was small, windowless, with a single oil lamp already burning, a cot in the corner, shelves stocked with food and water, and, Elena's breath caught, weapons. Guns, knives, even a sword mounted on the wall. Inside, Lucien ordered. What about you? I'm going back out there. Like hell you are. Elena.
He gripped her shoulders, and the look in his eyes was fiercer than she'd ever seen. I need you safe. I need to know you're protected so I can deal with this without worrying about you. Please, just this once. Trust me. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could help, could fight, could do something other than hide in a hole while the manor was under attack. But the raw desperation in his voice stopped her. Promise me you'll come back, she said. Promise me. I promise. He pushed her gently into the safe room, and the door started to swing shut. At the last second, Elena grabbed his wrist. Lucien, don't you dare die on me. We're not finished arguing yet. Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. Wouldn't dream of it. The door closed. Elena heard the lock click, heard his footsteps retreat, heard the distant sounds of shouting and breaking glass, and was that a gunshot? She sank down onto the cot, clutching her bandaged arm, and tried not to think about what was happening out there. Tried not to imagine Lucien fighting off however many attackers had come. Tried not to calculate the odds of him actually keeping that promise. Time moved strangely in the safe room. Could have been 20 minutes. Could have been 2 hours. Elena paced, sat, paced again. Her arm throbbed. Her heart wouldn't stop racing. Then, footsteps above. Multiple sets. Moving systematically through the manor like they were searching for something. Searching for someone. Elena backed into this corner, eyeing the weapons on the wall. She'd never fired a gun in her life. Barely knew which end was which. But if someone came through that door who wasn't Lucien, the footsteps passed overhead, moved on, faded. More waiting, more silence. Elena's nerves felt like they'd been stripped raw. When the door finally opened, she grabbed the nearest weapon, a knife, heavy and sharp, and raised it with shaking hands. Elena, it's me. Lucien looked like he'd been through a war. His coat was torn, his face smudged with soot, and there was blood on his hands that she desperately hoped wasn't his. She dropped the knife and threw herself at him before she could think better of it. His arms came around her automatically, holding tight. Are you hurt? She asked into his shoulder. No, minor cuts, nothing serious. Did you find them? 2 of them, the others got away. His voice was grim. But we know who sent them. Elena pulled back enough to see his face. Corvus. He touched her bandaged arm gently. This changes things. They've declared open war. No more subtlety. No more games. They want me destroyed, and they'll kill you to do it. So what do we do? Lucien looked at her for a long moment. I'm sending you away. Somewhere they can't find you, somewhere safe. Absolutely not. Elena, no! She stepped back, putting space between them. You don't get to make that decision. I'm not leaving. You could have died tonight. So could you, but I don't see you running away to hide. That's different. Why? Because you're a man? Because you're the Duke? Elena's voice rose despite her best efforts. I'm not a possession you can lock away for safekeeping. I'm a person. And if we're in this, we're in it together. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. Stop shutting me out and tell me what's really going on. Lucien ran a hand through his hair, clearly torn between keeping her safe and keeping her in the dark. Finally, he sighed. Come with me. He led her back up through the manor, through rooms that now had broken windows and overturned furniture, evidence of violence everywhere, to his study. The fire was still burning. He went straight to a cabinet, unlocked it, and pulled out a folder. This is everything, he said, dropping it on the desk. Every dirty deal my father made, every person he ruined, every secret he kept, including the one that got him killed. Elena opened the folder. Inside were letters, contracts, newspaper clippings, and photographs. She picked up one, and her blood went cold. The photo showed a much younger Lucien standing next to an older man who had to be his father. Behind them, half out of frame, was another man. Tall, thin, with dead eyes. That's Marcus Corvus, Lucien said quietly, my father's partner, his best friend, and the man I pushed down the stairs when I was 19 years old. The room seemed to tilt. Elena set down the photograph carefully. You killed him. Yes. Why? Because he was going to kill me. Lucien's voice was flat, emotionless. My father had gotten involved in things, trafficking, blackmail, worse. Corvus wanted to expand the operation, use the family name, the title, as cover for their crimes. I refused. My father sided with Corvus, so they decided I was a liability. Your own father tried to have me killed. Yes, I got to Corvus first, made it look like an accident, but not well enough. He met her eyes. His family knows, they've always known, and they want revenge. Not just business revenge, blood revenge. Elena sat down slowly. Everything was different now. The marriage, the isolation, the obsessive need for control, it all made sense in the worst possible way.
How many people know the truth? Maybe 10. Most are dead now. The ones who aren't, he gestured to the folder, are in there. Names, locations, evidence. If Corvus gets their hands on this, they can destroy everything I've built. More importantly, they can expose me. Have me arrested for murder. But it was self-defense. Prove it. Prove that a duke's son killed his father's business partner in self-defense 6 years ago with no witnesses and a body at the bottom of a staircase. Lucien's laugh was bitter. They'd hang me before the trial ended. Elena stared at the folder, her mind racing. This wasn't just business rivalry. This was personal vendetta with death as the end goal, and she was right in the middle of it. "Why did you marry me then?" she asked quietly. "If you knew it would make you vulnerable, why take on a wife at all?" Lucien was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I was tired of being alone." The admission was so simple, so painfully honest, that Elena's throat tightened. "The isolation was part of the defense," he continued. "No family, no close friends, no one they could use against me. It worked for years, but it was—" He stopped, searching for words. "I was becoming the monster they accused me of being, cold, cruel, caring about nothing except survival. I thought maybe having someone here, having a reason to pretend to be human again, might—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "It was stupid, selfish. I should have stayed alone." "No," Elena said. "You shouldn't have." She stood and walked around the desk until she was right in front of him. This close, she could see how tired he really was, how much weight he'd been carrying alone for 6 years. "What happened with Corvus, that wasn't your fault. Defending yourself isn't murder." "The law might disagree." "Then we don't let them find out." Elena picked up the folder. "This is the evidence, right? Everything they'd need to destroy you?" "Yes." "Then we destroy it, burn it, make sure there's no proof." "I tried that. They have copies, hidden somewhere I can't find." Lucien's expression was bleak. "The only way to end this is to end them, completely, and I don't—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "I don't know if I can do what that would require." "What would it require?" "Something worse than pushing a man down the stairs." Elena understood. He was talking about systematic destruction, about ruining an entire family the way they'd been trying to ruin him, about becoming the monster for real. "There has to be another way," she said. "If there is, I haven't found it." Outside, the night had gone quiet. The attackers were gone, but the damage remained. Broken windows would need boarding up, blood would need cleaning, and somewhere out there, Corvus was planning their next move. "I'm not leaving," Elena said firmly. "You can't make me. And I'm not going to hide while you fight this alone." "Elena, I mean it. We're married, for better or worse, remember? Well, this is the worst. So we deal with it together." Lucien looked at her like she was insane. "You have no idea what you're volunteering for." "Then tell me. Stop protecting me from the truth, and let me decide for myself." He studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "There's a meeting, 3 days from now. Corvus's suppliers and clients gathering to discuss the new shipping routes. If we could get inside, hear what they're planning, we'd have the advantage. Yes, but it's invitation only, high security, and I'm definitely not on the guest list." Elena's mind was already working. "But I might be." "What?" "They know about me now. Know I'm your wife. What if—" She paused, the idea forming even as she spoke. "What if I went to them? Pretended to be unhappy, trapped in a marriage I didn't want, looking for a way out?" "Absolutely not. They'd believe it. After what happened at the magistrate's dinner, everyone thinks we're already at each other's throats. I could approach them, offer information about you, gain their trust." "No." "Lucien, no!" His voice cracked like a whip. "You want to walk straight into the enemy's hands and hope they don't kill you? Are you insane?" "I'm practical. They want leverage? I'll give it to them. Feed them exactly what we want them to know, learn what they're planning, and report back. It's perfect." "It's suicide." "It's a chance." Elena grabbed his hands. "Look at me. I'm already a target. Tonight proved that.
At least this way, I'm not just sitting around waiting for the next attack. I'm doing something. Lucienne's hands were shaking in hers. If something happened to you, it won't. You can't promise that. Neither can you, but we have to try something. She squeezed his hands. Trust me. Please. The word seemed to physically pain him. Trust. Something he hadn't given anyone in 6 years. Something that had almost gotten him killed the last time he tried. But slowly, reluctantly, he nodded. If you do this, if I agree to this insanity, you follow my instructions exactly. You don't improvise. You don't take risks. You don't... Elena kissed him. It was impulsive, reckless, probably a terrible idea. But she was tired of walls and distance and both of them pretending they were just business partners in a loveless arrangement. For a heartbeat, Lucien froze. Then his hands came up to frame her face, and he kissed her back like a drowning man finding air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena smiled. For the record, I think we're well past just business. Elena! A scream cut through the night, high-pitched, terrified, coming from somewhere upstairs. They ran, through corridors upstairs, following the sound until they reached one of the servants' quarters. The door was open. Inside, Annie lay on the floor, throat cut, eyes staring at nothing. And on the wall above her body, written in blood, was a message. Next time, it's her. Elena's vision narrowed. She heard Lucienne shouting for the guards, heard Mrs. Godfrey crying, heard her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. But all she could see was Annie's dead face and the message on the wall and the terrible certainty that this was her fault. Her presence had brought this violence. Her defiance had gotten an innocent girl killed. Elena, Lucienne's voice cut through the roaring in her head. Look at me. She turned. His face was set in lines she'd never seen before. Not anger, not fear. Something colder. Something final. 3 days, he said quietly. You make contact with Corvus in 3 days. But Elena? His eyes were ice. When this is over, when we have what we need, I'm going to kill every single one of them. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And looking at Annie's body, at the blood on the walls, at the death that had come into their home, Elena found she didn't disagree. They buried Annie the next morning in the family plot behind the manor. The sky was gray and spitting rain, and only 5 people attended. Elena, Lucien, Mrs. Godfrey, and 2 footmen who kept their hands near their weapons the entire time. Elena stood at the graveside and felt the weight of every decision she'd made since arriving at this cursed house. Annie had been 19. She'd had freckles and red hair and a nervous laugh. And now she was dead because Elena had insisted on being seen, on mattering, on not disappearing into the background like a good purchased bride should have. It's not your fault, Lucien said quietly beside her. Yes, it is. They would have killed someone to send a message. Whether you'd made a scene at that dinner or not, whether you'd read those ledgers or stayed ignorant, they would have found a reason. His jaw was set hard. The only people responsible for this are the ones who gave the order. Mrs. Godfrey finished her prayer and walked back toward the house, shoulders hunched against the rain. The footman followed. Elena and Lucien stood alone in the mud with Annie's fresh grave between them and everything else. I meant what I said last night, Lucien said. When this is over, I'm going to... I know, so am I. He looked at her sharply. Elena, don't. Don't tell me to stay clean, stay innocent, stay out of it. I'm already in it. She turned to face him fully. They wrote that message in her blood. Next time, it's her. They're not going to stop until one of us is dead, so we end this. Whatever it takes. The rain picked up, plastering her hair to her face, but she didn't move. Lucien studied her like he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. Not the woman he'd bought or the Duchess he'd created, but the person underneath all of it. You're sure about this? About making contact with Corvus? I'm sure. Once you walk into that building, I can't protect you. I won't even know where you are. If something goes wrong, then I deal with it. Elena, stop. She reached out and grabbed his hand. Stop trying to save me. I don't need saving. I need a partner. Can you give me that? His fingers tightened around hers, and for a moment he looked lost, like a man who'd spent so long fighting alone that he'd forgotten how to do anything else. I don't know how, he admitted finally. Then we'll figure it out together. Starting now. They walked back to the house through the rain, and Elena felt something shift between them. Not softer, exactly. Harder, maybe. More real.
They weren't pretending anymore, not about the marriage, not about the danger, not about what they were willing to become to survive this. The plan took shape over the next 2 days. Lucien had contacts, people who owed him favors, people who had their own reasons to hate Corvus. One of them was a banker named Thorne, who'd lost his brother to Corvus's schemes 5 years ago. Another was a shipping clerk who fed Lucien information in exchange for protection. Between them, they pieced together where the meeting would be and how Elena could get inside. "There's a woman," Thorne explained, sitting in Lucian's study with a glass of brandy and a perpetual nervous twitch. "Margaret Stills, she's Corvus's secretary, handles all their correspondence, scheduling everything. If you want an invitation to that meeting, you go through her." "How do I approach her?" Elena asked. "You don't. She approaches you." Thorne took a sip of brandy. "There's a charity auction tomorrow night, St. Catherine's Orphanage fundraiser. All the society ladies will be there, including Margaret. She goes every year, volunteers actually, believes in the cause. It's the one place she lets her guard down." "So I attend the auction, and what? Strike up a conversation?" "More than that. You make yourself useful. Volunteer alongside her. Show her you're not just another spoiled duchess." Thorne glanced at Lucian. "No offense." "None taken," Lucien said dryly. "Margaret's got a soft spot for people who actually do the work, and she's been known to—" Thorne hesitated. "Let's say she's sympathetic to wives trapped in difficult marriages. Her husband wasn't kind. If you play it right, if you make her believe you're desperate to escape Viramont, she might offer help." "Help meaning access to Corvus?" "Exactly." Elena leaned back in her chair. "And when she asks why I want to escape, what do I tell her?" "The truth." Lucien's voice was cold. "Or close enough to it. Tell her I'm controlling, dangerous, that the marriage was forced and you're afraid of what I'll do if you try to leave. Tell her—" He stopped, jaw working. "Tell her I hit you." The room went silent. "Lucien," Elena said carefully, "I'm not going to— It's believable. Men like me, men with my reputation, everyone already assumes violence. Use it. I won't lie about that. I won't make people think you're— I don't care what people think." He met her eyes. "I care about you staying alive long enough to finish this. If that means letting them believe I'm a monster, so be it. I've been called worse." Elena wanted to argue. Wanted to insist there had to be another way. But looking at his face, at the resignation there, the acceptance that his reputation was already ruined beyond saving, she realized he was right. This was the role he'd been cast in years ago. Might as well use it. "Fine," she said quietly. "But when this is over, when they're all dead or destroyed or whatever we're calling it, I'm telling everyone the truth. If we're both still alive to tell it." The auction was held in the grand ballroom of the Pemberton Hotel, all crystal chandeliers and gilt furniture, and people wearing more wealth than most families would see in a lifetime. Elena arrived alone. Lucien had insisted, said it would look more believable if she seemed to be acting independently, and immediately felt every eye in the room turn toward her. The whispers started instantly. Without her husband. Heard they're already fighting. Barely 3 weeks married. Elena kept her head high and walked straight to the volunteer table where several women were organizing auction items. An older woman with kind eyes and iron-gray hair looked up and smiled. "Can I help you, dear?" "I'd like to volunteer, if you need the help." "Oh, we always need help. I'm Mary, and this is Susan, and— Margaret, dear, we have another volunteer." The woman who turned around was younger than Elena expected, maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back severely and eyes that assessed everything in one quick glance. She wore a simple dress, no jewelry except a wedding ring that looked like it had been worn thin by nervous fidgeting. "Another volunteer," Margaret repeated, and there was something sharp in her voice. "How generous of you, Your Grace." So she knew exactly who Elena was. Good. That saved time. "I wanted to help," Elena said simply. "If that's all right." Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. "We're sorting the auction items by category. Can you handle that?" "Yes." They worked in silence for the first hour. Elena cataloged items, jewelry, paintings, antique books, while Margaret organized the bidding paddles and Mary handled the money box. The other women chatted around them, gossiping about who was attending and who wasn't, but Margaret stayed focused on her work. It was Elena who finally broke the silence between them. "You come every year, don't you?" Margaret glanced up. "I do. St. Catherine's does good work. The children deserve support."
I grew up near an orphanage, used to sneak over and play with the children when I was supposed to be at lessons. Elena smiled at the memory. My mother would find me covered in dirt, teaching them all the wrong words. Wrong words? I had a talent for picking up the things servants said when they thought I wasn't listening. Margaret's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. And what did your mother think of that? She thought I was going to give her father a heart attack. She was probably right. Elena set down the necklace she'd been examining. She died 5 years ago. I think about her every day. I'm sorry. So am I. They fell back into silence, but it was different now. Less hostile, more human. By the time the auction started, Elena had managed to work alongside Margaret for 3 hours without either of them directly addressing the elephant in the room. But as the guests filed in and took their seats, Margaret pulled Elena aside. Why are you really here? Elena had practiced this, had run through it a dozen times with Lucien, perfecting the right tone of desperation mixed with pride. But looking at Margaret's face, at the intelligence there, the wariness, she decided to go with something closer to the truth. Because I'm drowning, and I don't know who else to ask for help. Margaret's expression didn't change. You married the Duke of Viramont 3 weeks ago. By all accounts, you're living in luxury. What exactly are you drowning in? Expectations. Control. A life I never chose. Elena kept her voice low. My father sold me to clear his debts. Viramont wanted a wife who would stay silent and look decorative. I'm not good at either of those things. So leave him. And go where? Back to my father, who made it clear I'm worth less than his gambling markers? Out on my own with no money, no connections, no way to survive? Elena shook her head. I'm trapped. And everyone around me keeps telling me how lucky I am to be trapped in such a nice cage. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you want from me? I don't know yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe just someone who understands what it's like to be stuck in a marriage with no way out. She'd guessed right. Margaret's expression flickered. Pain, memory, something old and scarred. My husband died 7 years ago, Margaret said quietly. I haven't remarried, haven't even considered it, because the thought of being owned again makes me want to walk into the ocean and not come back. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm free now. It took his death, but I'm free. Margaret looked at Elena directly. You won't be, though, not unless Viramont dies or you find a way to make him let you go. And men like him don't let go easily. I know. Do you? Margaret's voice dropped even lower. Do you know what he's capable of? What his family has done? I know enough. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then, as the auction began and people's attention turned to the stage, she leaned in close. There's a meeting, tomorrow night. People who have reasons to oppose Viramont's business interests. If you're serious about finding a way out, if you want to connect with people who might be able to help you, I can arrange an introduction. Elena's heart hammered. This was it, the opening. Yes, she said. Please, I'll do whatever it takes. Margaret nodded once, sharp and decisive. Carriage will pick you up at 8, 3 blocks from the manor, south entrance to the park. Don't be followed. And Elena? She met her eyes. If you're lying to me, if this is some scheme on Viramont's behalf, they will kill you. Do you understand? I understand. The auction ended at 11. Elena waited until midnight before slipping out of the hotel and finding the carriage Lucien had sent. He was inside, waiting, and the moment she climbed in, he pulled her close. Did it work? Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. They're sending a carriage. Lucien's arms tightened around her. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. There is no other way. You said so yourself. I know what I said. I'm saying something different now. He pulled back enough to look at her face. Elena, if anything happens to you, it won't. You can't promise that. Neither can you. But we're out of options and out of time. She cupped his face with both hands. Trust me, please. Just trust me. He kissed her then, desperate and fierce, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I'll have men positioned around the meeting location. If you need help, if anything goes wrong, you say the word Nightingale, and they'll extract you immediately. Nightingale, got it. And Elena, if they ask you to prove your loyalty, if they ask you to do something that would genuinely hurt me, do it. She pulled back.
What? I mean it. Whatever they ask, you do. Your safety is worth more than my business, my reputation, my life. Do you understand? I'm not going to... Promise me. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist she'd find a way to play both sides without actually betraying him. But looking at his face, at the raw fear there, she nodded. I promise. The next day crawled by like torture. Elena tried to read, tried to eat, tried to do anything other than pace and count the hours. Lucien disappeared into his study with Morrison and several other men Elena didn't recognize, planning contingencies and backup plans and all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. At 7:30, Elena dressed. Simple dark cloak, plain dress underneath. Nothing that would mark her as a duchess. Lucien appeared in the doorway of her room just as she was pinning up her hair. Ready? No, but I'm going anyway. He walked her to the south entrance of the park himself, both of them silent. At the meeting point, he stopped and turned her to face him. If this goes wrong, it won't. If it does, he continued, ignoring her interruption, if they figure out you're working with me and you can't escape, he pulled something from his pocket. A small knife, sharp and deadly. Hide this. Use it if you have to. Elena took the knife and tucked it into her boot. I love how we've gone from simple information gathering to potential stabbing situation. I'm serious. So am I. She stood on her toes and kissed him quickly. I'll be back by midnight. Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone. That's my line. The carriage appeared exactly at 8, black, unmarked, with a driver who didn't speak. Elena climbed inside and found Margaret already waiting. You came, the older woman said. I told you I would. Many people say things they don't mean. They drove in silence through streets Elena didn't recognize, into a part of the city that got progressively darker and rougher. When they finally stopped, it was in front of a warehouse that looked abandoned from the outside. Margaret led her through a side entrance and up a narrow staircase to a room on the second floor. Inside, 5 people sat around a table. Elena recognized none of them, but their expressions, cold, calculating, hostile, made it very clear what kind of meeting this was. At the head of the table sat a man in his 50s with dead eyes and a smile that never reached them. He stood when Elena entered. Mrs. Viermont, how kind of you to join us. I'm Thomas Corvus. Elena forced herself to walk forward and take the offered seat. Thank you for seeing me. Margaret speaks very highly of you, says you're unhappy in your marriage. Thomas sat back down, that terrible smile still fixed in place. Is that true? Yes. And yet you married him willingly, or so the papers said. I married him because my father's debts left me no choice. There's a difference between willing and coerced. Indeed. Thomas steepled his fingers. Tell me, Mrs. Viermont, what is it you want from us? This was the moment, the point where she either committed fully or backed out. Elena thought of Annie's dead face, of Lucian's promise to kill everyone in this room, of the knife in her boot and the fear she'd seen in Margaret's eyes. I want my freedom, she said clearly, and I want to hurt the man who took it from me. The room was silent. Then Thomas started laughing, a cold, mirthless sound. Hurt him? My dear, we've been trying to hurt Lucien Viermont for 6 years. What makes you think you can do what we've failed to accomplish? Because I'm inside his house, inside his life. I know things you don't. Such as? Elena took a breath. This was it, the point of no return. Such as where he keeps the evidence. The real evidence. The documents that prove what happened 6 years ago with Marcus Corvus. The ones you've been looking for. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Thomas leaned forward slowly. You're saying you know where Viermont hides his insurance? Yes. Prove it. Elena reached into her cloak and pulled out a single piece of paper, a copy of one of the documents from Lucien's safe. Nothing that would actually incriminate him, but enough to prove she had access. Thomas snatched it from her hand and studied it intensely. Then he looked up at Elena with something approaching respect. This is genuine. I told you, I have access. I can get you the rest, but I want something in return. Name it. Passage out of the country, new identity. Enough money to start over somewhere. Lucian will never find me. Elena met his eyes. And I want to be there when you destroy him. I want to watch. Thomas smiled, a real smile this time, full of malice and satisfaction. I think we can arrange that, Mrs. Viermont. I think we can arrange that very well indeed. They spent the next hour discussing logistics. When Elena could access the documents, how she'd get them out of the manor without being seen, where the exchange would take place. Through it all, Elena played her part perfectly. The desperate wife, the betrayed duchess, the woman who'd been pushed too far and finally pushed back. Margaret walked her out when the meeting ended. In the shadows of the warehouse entrance, she grabbed Elena's arm. Are you sure about this? Once you give them those documents, there's no going back. Viramont will know you betrayed him. Good, Elena said coldly. Let him know. Let him feel what I've felt every day since I arrived at that prison he calls a home. Margaret nodded slowly. You're braver than I was. It took my husband's death to free me. You're freeing yourself. I'm trying. The carriage ride back was silent. Elena kept her hands folded in her lap so no one would see them shaking. When they dropped her 3 blocks from the manor, she walked the rest of the way slowly, giving Lucien's men time to confirm she was alone. He was waiting in the entrance hall when she arrived, pacing like a caged animal. The moment he saw her, he crossed the distance in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. Are you hurt? Did they... I'm fine. It worked. They believe me. Lucia's chin pulled back enough to search her face. All of them? Thomas Corvus himself. He wants the documents, the ones proving what happened 6 years ago. When? 3 days. I told them I needed time to access the safe without you noticing. Elena gripped his arms. Lucien, there were 5 of them, plus Margaret. If we can get them all in one place, we can end this. Yes. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth, frantic and relieved. You were perfect. You're perfect. I was terrified. You didn't show it. That's what matters. They moved to the study where Morrison and the others were waiting. Elena repeated everything, every word spoken, every person in the room, every detail of the warehouse location. Morrison took notes while Lucien paced, his mind clearly working through strategies. 3 days isn't much time, Morrison said, but it's enough. We can position men around the warehouse. When they arrive for the exchange, we take them all, Lucien finished, every single one. No escapes, no survivors. That's mass murder, one of the other men pointed out. That's justice. Lucien's voice was iron. They killed Annie. They've killed others. They would have killed Elena tonight if they'd suspected her. They don't get mercy. Elena thought about Annie's grave in the rain, about the message written in blood, about Thomas Corvus's dead eyes and terrible smile. No mercy, she agreed quietly. The next 3 days were careful choreography. Elena played the dutiful wife in public, attended social events with Lucien where they maintained their facade of tension. In private, they planned every detail of the exchange. The documents they'd plant, realistic enough to fool Corvus, damaging enough to seem valuable, but ultimately useless as evidence. The positioning of Lucien's men around the warehouse. The timing of the raid. Margaret visited the manor once, ostensibly to drop off charity auction paperwork. She pulled Elena aside in the entrance hall. Are you still certain? Thomas is not a forgiving man. If he discovers you've betrayed him, he won't discover anything until it's too late. I hope you're right. Margaret glanced around nervously. I'm risking everything helping you. If Thomas finds out I brought you in, then make sure you're not there when it happens. Margaret's eyes widened. What? The exchange. When I bring the documents. Be somewhere else, somewhere public with witnesses. Elena kept her voice low. Trust me on this. Elena, what are you planning? Just trust me, please. Margaret stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. The library? I'll be at the public library that evening, researching for St. Catherine's. Good. Stay there until you hear what happened. On the night of the exchange, Elena dressed in the same plain clothes she'd worn to the first meeting. Lucien helped her pack the false documents into a leather satchel, his hand steady, even though his face was tight with tension. You remember the plan? Walk in, hand over the documents, give you the signal, get out. Elena checked the knife in her boot one more time. Simple. Nothing about this is simple. I know. He pulled her close one more time. If this goes wrong, if something happens and you can't escape, use the knife. Don't let them take you alive. Lucien, promise me. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist it wouldn't come to that, but looking at his face, at the raw terror there, she nodded. I promise.
The warehouse was dark when Elena arrived. She walked in alone, the satchel heavy in her hand, and found Thomas Corvus waiting with his men, 6 of them this time, all armed. "Mrs. Viremont," Thomas said, "do you have what we agreed upon?" Elena set the satchel on the table between them. "Everything, names, dates, evidence, enough to hang him." Thomas opened the satchel and pulled out the first document, started reading. His expression changed, confusion first, then suspicion, then fury. "This is fake." Elena's hand went to her boot. "No, it's not. These documents are dated wrong. The signatures don't match. This is—" He looked up at her, and his eyes were pure murder. "You're working with him." "No. Seize her." 2 men grabbed Elena's arms before she could draw the knife. She struggled, but they were stronger, dragging her toward the back of the warehouse. "Now!" she screamed. "Nightingale!" The windows exploded. Lucien's men came through every entrance, windows, doors, even the roof. Gunfire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space. Elena threw herself to the floor as bullets tore through the air above her. Someone grabbed her arm, one of Corvus's men, and she finally got the knife out, driving it into his thigh. He screamed and let go. She scrambled backward, looking for cover, for an exit, for Lucien. He came through the main entrance like an avenging angel, gun in one hand and something dark and terrible in his expression. He shot the first man who moved toward Elena without hesitation, then the second. Thomas Corvus was running for the back exit. Lucien pursued like death itself, catching him at the door and slamming him against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. "For Annie," Lucien said quietly. Then he shot him in the chest. The gunfire stopped. Elena's ears were ringing. The warehouse smelled like smoke and blood and fear. She stood on shaking legs and looked around at the carnage. 7 bodies, all of them Corvus's men. Morrison appeared at her side. "Your Grace, are you hurt?" "No, I don't think so. She looked down at her hands. There was blood on them. She didn't know if it was hers. Lucien was there suddenly, pulling her into his arms, checking her for injuries with desperate hands. "You're alive. You're alive. Tell me you're not hurt." "I'm fine. Lucien, is it over?" He looked at the bodies, at Thomas Corvus's corpse in particular, and something in his expression finally relaxed. "It's over." The authorities arrived an hour later. Lucien had prepared for this, had documentation showing the attack on the manor, had witnesses to Annie's murder, had evidence of Corvus's criminal operations going back years. Self-defense, his lawyer argued, protection of property and person, justified response to a clear and present danger. The magistrate, a different one than the dinner party disaster, reviewed the evidence and agreed. No charges would be filed. The Duke and Duchess of Viremont had acted within their rights. Elena sat in the study 3 days later and stared at the newspaper headline, "Corvus Crime Syndicate Destroyed." She'd read the article 4 times and still couldn't quite believe it was real. Lucien appeared in the doorway with tea. Actual tea that he'd made himself, which was somehow more shocking than everything that had happened in the warehouse. "Thought you might want this. You made tea." "I've been known to do shocking things." Elena took the cup and sipped. It was terrible, too strong, too bitter, but she didn't care. "It's really over?" "It's really over. Corvus is dead. His operations are being dismantled. The people who worked for him are either in custody or running for their lives." Lucien sat down across from her. "We're safe. Margaret. I sent word she's unharmed, and I've arranged a pension for her, enough that she'll never have to worry about money again." "That's good. She helped us." "She did." Lucien was quiet for a moment. "Elena, about what you did, walking into that warehouse, risking yourself. We've been through this. It was necessary. It was brave. Stupid and terrifying and brave." He reached across and took her hand. "I've spent 6 years trusting no one, and you made me trust you. Made me believe we could actually do this together. We did do it together. You think I could have walked in there alone? Could have faced Corvus without knowing you were coming?" Elena squeezed his hand. "We're a team, for better or worse, remember?" "For better or worse," he echoed, then softer. "I think I'm in love with you." Elena blinked. "You think?" "I'm not good at this. Haven't had much practice." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. "But yes, I know, I love you." Elena set down the terrible tea and moved to sit in his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Good. Because I definitely love you. Even when you're controlling and paranoid and make awful tea, the tea isn't that bad.
It's horrific, but I appreciate the gesture. He kissed her then, soft and lingering, and Elena felt something in her chest finally unclench. They'd survived. Against all odds, despite everything trying to kill them, they'd survived. And more than that, they'd won. The letter arrived the next morning. Elena found it on the breakfast table, addressed to her in elegant script. She opened it while Lucien read through business correspondence and Morrison droned on about shipping schedules. Inside was a single page. Your Grace, thank you for the warning. I was indeed at the library when the events at the warehouse transpired. The news reports suggest it was quite the ordeal. I wanted you to know, I never believed your story. From the moment you approached me at the auction, I knew you were playing a role. But I helped you anyway. Why? Because I've spent 7 years watching men like Thomas Corvus destroy lives without consequence. Because Annie was a sweet girl who didn't deserve what happened to her. And because you reminded me of who I was before my husband broke me. Someone willing to fight. You and the Duke deserve each other. And I mean that as the highest compliment. Yours in freedom. Margaret Elena smiled and passed the letter to Lucien. He read it, and something that might have been respect crossed his face. She knew the whole time. She knew, and helped anyway. Interesting woman. She is. I think I'll invite her to tea next week. Please don't serve her what I made yesterday. Obviously not. I'm not trying to poison our allies. Morrison coughed pointedly. If your graces are finished discussing tea, we do have actual business to attend to. The shipping contracts need review. The port authorities are requesting a meeting, and there are at least 7 invitations to social events that require responses. Elena groaned. The glamorous life of a duchess. You wanted to be involved, Lucien pointed out. Welcome to the boring parts of running an empire. Can't we just fight more crime syndicates instead? Please no, I've had enough violence for one lifetime. But he was smiling as he said it, and Elena realized with something like shock that she was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. Not the careful performance she'd perfected over the years, not the smile that was expected. Real happiness that came from being exactly where she wanted to be, with exactly who she wanted to be with. The girl who'd been traded to save her father's name didn't exist anymore. The purchased bride was gone. In their place was a woman who'd fought for her life, her freedom, and her right to choose her own future. And she'd won. 3 months after the warehouse, Elena stood in what used to be Lucien's study and looked at the changes she'd made. The heavy dark curtains were gone, replaced with something that actually let light in. Half the intimidating furniture had been removed. The desk, that massive monument to masculine authority, now had 2 chairs behind it instead of 1. You're rearranging again, Lucy said from the doorway. I'm improving. There's a difference. Is there? But he was smiling as he said it, crossing the room to look at the new seating arrangement. 2 chairs. We work together now. Seemed appropriate. Elena gestured to the stack of correspondence on the desk. Besides, you need someone to keep you from making terrible business decisions. I make excellent business decisions. You were about to invest in a copper mine that flooded 3 years ago. Morrison had to physically take the contract away from you. That was one time. It was last week. Lucien pulled her into his arms, and Elena went willingly, resting her head against his chest. This had become normal somehow. The casual touches, the easy affection, the sense that they were building something real instead of just surviving. The Whitmore situation has been resolved, he said into her hair. His uncle agreed to restore our shipping contracts. Apparently the reminder that we destroyed an entire criminal syndicate in one night made him cooperative. Imagine that. Violence as a negotiating tactic. Who knew? You're terrible. You love me anyway. I do. He pulled back enough to look at her face. Speaking of which, there's something I want to show you. He led her out of the study, through corridors she now knew by heart, to a part of the manor she'd rarely visited, the West Wing, where the family portraits hung in gloomy succession. Lucien stopped in front of a particular painting, his father, stern and cold-eyed, staring down at them with perpetual disapproval. I'm having it removed, Lucien said quietly. All of them, actually. The whole gallery. I want to start fresh. Elena looked at the portrait, at the man who'd tried to have his own son killed, and felt nothing but relief at the thought of it gone. What will you replace them with? I don't know yet. Something that isn't about the past. Something about... He stopped, searching for words. About what we're building, what we're becoming. A family?
The word hung in the air between them. They hadn't talked about children yet, hadn't even really discussed what their future looked like beyond survival and revenge. But standing here in the gallery of dead relatives, Elena realized she wanted that future, wanted to fill this house with life instead of ghosts. Eventually, Lucien said carefully, "If you want that." "I do. Not right now. We have too much work to do first. But someday," Elena turned to face him fully, "I want to build something with you. Something that isn't just about power or wealth or staying alive. Something real." "Then we will." The knock on the front door interrupted them. Mrs. Godfrey appeared moments later, looking flustered in a way Elena had never seen. "Your Graces, there are rather a lot of people outside. They're asking to see you." "People?" Lucien frowned. "What people?" "Townsfolk, Your Grace. From the Port District. They said—" She hesitated. "They said they wanted to thank you." Elena and Lucien exchanged glances. Then they walked together to the entrance hall and opened the front door. At least 50 people stood in the courtyard. Workers, by the look of them. Dock workers, warehouse employees, sailors, shopkeepers. The ones who'd been most affected by Corvus's stranglehold on the port. They stood in the rain, hats in hands, looking up at the manor with a mixture of hope and nervousness. An older man stepped forward, scarred hands, weathered face, the look of someone who'd spent his life working with his back. "Your Grace, we heard what you did, taking down Corvus, opening up the shipping contracts again." He cleared his throat. "Half of us have jobs now because of that, real jobs with fair pay. We just wanted to say thank you." Elena felt Lucien tense beside her. He wasn't good with gratitude, she'd learned. Wasn't sure how to handle people seeing him as anything other than dangerous or cruel. She stepped forward before he could retreat into formality. "You don't need to thank us," she said clearly. "Corvus hurt people we cared about. What we did for them. For Annie. For everyone he destroyed." "Still deserves thanks," another voice called from the crowd. "You could have just protected yourselves. Could have run. Instead, you fought back. That matters to us." More voices joined in, agreeing, and Elena saw something shift in Lucien's expression. Not softening exactly, but recognition, maybe. That they weren't just the feared Duke and his strange Duchess. They were people who'd chosen to fight instead of hide. "If anyone needs work," Lucien said finally, his voice carrying across the courtyard, "come to Morrison at the port office. We're expanding operations. We'll need good people." The crowd stirred, muttering among themselves with obvious relief. Several people called out thanks again before they started to disperse, but the older man who'd spoken first stayed behind. "Your Grace, one more thing." He looked uncomfortable. "There's been talk about what really happened 6 years ago, about Marcus Corvus." Elena felt Lucien go very still beside her. "What kind of talk?" she asked carefully. "The kind that says maybe the official story wasn't the whole truth. The kind that says maybe Marcus Corvus was into things that would have gotten a lot of innocent people killed if someone hadn't stopped him." The man met Lucien's eyes directly. "We're not asking for details. We're just saying, whatever you did back then, we're not holding it against you now." He tipped his hat and left, and Elena and Lucien stood in the doorway watching the crowd disappear down the drive. "They know," Lucien said quietly, "or they suspect. And they don't care." Elena took his hand. "That has to mean something. It means we got lucky, that they're choosing to believe the better version of events. Or it means you're not the monster you think you are." He looked at her, something raw and vulnerable in his expression. "I killed a man, Elena. Pushed him down the stairs and watched him die. That's not something to be proud of. You defended yourself against someone who wanted you dead. That's not murder. That's survival." She squeezed his hand. "And you've spent 6 years punishing yourself for it. Maybe it's time to stop. I don't know how. Then we'll figure it out. Together." The word was becoming their mantra. Together. Not alone, not isolated, not carrying burdens in silence. Together. That evening, Elena found Margaret's letter on her desk, a response to the tea invitation. She read it twice, then brought it to Lucien. "Margaret wants to help." "Help with what?" "St. Catherine's Orphanage. She's proposing a partnership, Viramont Funding, her administration. Give the children education, trade skills, real opportunities instead of just charity." Elena set down the letter. "What do you think?" "I think you've already decided we're doing it." I have, but I wanted your input anyway. Lucien read the letter, and Elena watched his face change as he processed the proposal. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, not the cold duke or the dangerous adversary, but the person underneath who actually cared about making things better. It's a good plan, he said finally. We'll need to review the finances, make sure we can sustain it long term. But yes, let's do it. Really? Really? He looked up at her. You're changing me, making me think about things beyond just survival and revenge. I'm not sure if I should thank you or curse you for it. Both. Definitely both. The partnership with St. Catherine's launched 2 months later with a public ceremony that Elena insisted they attend despite Lucian's protests about unnecessary spectacle. They stood on a platform in front of the newly renovated orphanage while Margaret gave a speech about opportunity and hope, and Elena felt Lucien's hand find hers behind the podium. Mrs. Thornberry was in the audience. Elena caught her eye and saw the older woman's expression. Surprise, maybe, or grudging respect. After the ceremony, she approached. Duchess, I must say this is quite the undertaking. Thank you, Mrs. Thornberry. Margaret's vision, really. We're just providing support. Still, the older woman glanced at Lucian, who was talking to the magistrate about funding structures. I may have misjudged your marriage. You seem happy. It wasn't an apology exactly, but from someone like Mrs.
Thornberry, it was close enough. We are, Elena said simply. It took work to get here, but we are. Well, good for you then. She paused. And if you ever need an ally at the next charity auction, do let me know. I rather enjoyed watching you put young Whitmore in his place at the magistrate's dinner. She walked away before Elena could respond, and Elena found herself laughing despite everything. Even the gossips were coming around.
That night, lying in bed with Lucian's arm around her waist, Elena stared at the ceiling and thought about how far they'd come. From that first rain-soaked arrival, from her defiant stand in his study, from the terror of the warehouse and the blood on the marble stairs. What are you thinking about? Lucian murmured against her shoulder. How much I hated you when we first met. I remember. You looked at me like I was something you'd scraped off your shoe. You deserved it. You were being insufferable. I was being cautious. You were being an ass, and Elena rolled over to face him. But I'm glad you bought me anyway. I didn't buy you. I made an arrangement with your father. Semantics. Important semantics. Fine. I'm glad you made an arrangement with my father that resulted in me being here with you instead of anywhere else. She kissed him softly. Better? Much. So 6 months after the warehouse, Elena sat in the study, their study now, officially, reviewing shipping manifests when Morrison burst in without knocking. Your Graces, we have a problem. Lucien looked up from his correspondence. What kind of problem? The kind where your father-in-law has been arrested for fraud. Elena dropped the manifest. What? Apparently he's been running a scheme for the past year, falsifying investment opportunities, taking money from people who thought they were buying into legitimate ventures. Morrison set down a newspaper. It's all over the papers. They're calling it the largest fraud case in a decade. Elena picked up the paper with shaking hands. There was her father's face, looking haggard and old, being led away in chains. The headline screamed, Harrow Fraud Scheme Exposed. How bad is it? Lucien asked quietly. Very bad. Dozens of victims. Hundreds of thousands in stolen funds. Morrison glanced at Elena apologetically. They're looking into everyone connected to him, including family. Including me, Elena finished. I'm afraid so, Your Grace. Lucien stood immediately. Then we hire the best lawyers. We prove Elena had nothing to do with his schemes. No, Elena interrupted. Both men looked at her. No? Lucien repeated. I'm not defending him, and I'm not hiding from the investigation. Elena set down the paper. If they want to question me, fine. I'll tell them the truth. That my father sold me to clear his debts, that I haven't spoken to him since the wedding, that I knew nothing about any fraud scheme. Elena, I'm done protecting the Harrow name, done pretending my father was anything other than a coward and a criminal. She stood, and her voice was steady despite the anger burning through her. Let the investigators come. Let them see exactly what kind of man he was and exactly how little I owe him. The investigation took 3 weeks. Elena sat through hours of questioning, providing documentation of every interaction with her father since the marriage, which amounted to almost nothing. No letters, no visits, no contact except for one brief note thanking her for saving the family honor that made her want to burn the paper it was written on. In the end, the investigators cleared her completely. The Duchess of Veramont, they concluded, had been as much a victim of Harold Harrow's schemes as anyone else. More, actually, since he'd used her as payment to clear debts he'd accumulated through fraud. When the verdict came down, Elena didn't feel relief. She felt nothing at all, just a cold emptiness where family loyalty used to be. Your father has been sentenced to 15 years, Lucian told her that evening. They're seizing all his assets to repay the victims. Good. Elena, what? You want me to feel sorry for him? To visit him in prison and forgive him for selling me like property? She laughed, sharp and bitter. He made his choices. He can live with the consequences. I know. I just want to make sure you're all right. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Elena turned to face him. Because I finally understand something. I spent my whole life trying to be a good daughter, trying to save a family name that wasn't worth saving. And all it got me was traded away like livestock, but you... Her voice caught. You never pretended to be anything you weren't. You told me it was a transaction. You were honest about what you needed and why you needed it, and somehow that honesty turned into this. She gestured between them, at the life they'd built together. This isn't what I expected, Lucian said quietly. When I arranged that marriage, I thought I was buying protection. A wife who would be decorative and unobtrusive and require minimal effort. How's that working out for you? Terribly. You're none of those things. He pulled her close. You're difficult and defiant, and you rearrange my furniture without asking. Monster that I am. The worst. He kissed her forehead. I wouldn't change a single thing. A year after the warehouse, Elena stood in the newly redesigned portrait gallery and looked at what they'd created. Instead of gloomy ancestors, the walls now held paintings of the port, the orphanage, the workers in the shipyards, places and people that mattered, a legacy being built instead of inherited. Lucien appeared beside her carrying 2 glasses of wine. Morrison says the new trade agreements are finalized. We'll have exclusive shipping rights for the next 5 years. That's good. It's more than good. It's a monopoly. He handed her a glass. We're essentially controlling the entire port now. Are we the villains in someone else's story? The question made him pause. Probably. But we're not using it to hurt people. We're using it to build things. Jobs, schools, opportunities. He clinked his glass against hers. I think that makes us better than the alternative. Better than your father. Better than Corvus. Better than who I was a year ago. Elena sipped her wine and leaned against him, looking at the painting of the orphanage. Children played in the courtyard, bright and alive, completely unlike the gloomy portraits that used to dominate this space. I want to commission one more painting, she said. Of what? Us. Not formal, not posed, just us, working together in the study or walking the grounds. Something real. That's very sentimental of you. I'm allowed to be sentimental. I fought off a crime syndicate. I've earned it. Fair point. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the light change across the paintings, and Elena thought about all the versions of herself that had led to this moment. The daughter who'd tried so hard to be good. The bride who'd arrived in the rain, angry and defiant. The woman who'd walked into a warehouse knowing she might not walk out. The Duchess who'd chosen partnership over safety. All of them were real. All of them mattered. I saw Margaret yesterday, Elena said. She's planning to expand the orphanage program to 3 more cities. We'll need to increase funding. I know. I already spoke to Morrison about it. Lucian raised an eyebrow. You're running my business now. Our business, and yes. She grinned at his expression. Problem? Not at all. You're better at it than I am anyway. I know. Bupaxi, Sain Bon says. 3 years after the warehouse, Elena sat across from a journalist and tried not to laugh at the woman's questions. And how would you describe your role as Duchess, Your Grace? Active, Elena said diplomatically. I'm involved in most of the business decisions, the charitable organizations, the port operations. My husband and I work as partners. That's quite unusual. Is it? I can read contracts and negotiate terms as well as any man. Why wouldn't I be involved? The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Caroline, who wrote for one of the more progressive papers, smiled. Indeed. And what about the rumors that you were the one who orchestrated the takedown of the Corvus organization? Elena had been expecting this question. The story had evolved over the years, grown in the telling. Some versions had her as a helpless victim. Others painted her as a cunning strategist. A few even suggested she'd been secretly running Corvus all along. My husband and I dealt with the threat to our safety, she said carefully. Together, that's all. But you were the one who infiltrated their operation. I was one of the people involved, yes. And you weren't afraid? Elena thought about that moment in the warehouse, watching Thomas Corvus realize she'd betrayed him, about the knife in her boot and the promise she'd made to use it, about the sound of gunfire and the smell of blood and the terrible certainty that she might die. I was terrified, she said honestly, but fear isn't a reason not to act. Sometimes it's the opposite. Fear is what shows you what really matters. Caroline scribbled notes furiously. That's quite the philosophy, Your Grace. It's kept me alive. The article came out 2 weeks later with a headline that made Lucian groan. The Duchess Who Broke the Rules. It painted Elena as a new kind of aristocrat, active, engaged, refusing to stay silent or decorative. Within days, she started receiving letters from other women, wives trapped in difficult marriages, daughters sold off to clear debts, women looking for a way to claim their own power. You're becoming a symbol, Lucian said, reading through the stack of correspondence. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to live my life. Too late. You fought back against expectations, against danger, against everyone who told you to be quiet and obedient. That means something to people. Elena looked at the letters, dozens of them, from women she'd never met, asking for advice or help, or just sharing their own stories. She thought about refusing, about maintaining distance and privacy. Then she thought about Annie, about Margaret, about every woman who'd been told her value was less than a man's gambling debts. We need to hire more staff, she said finally. If we're going to help these people properly, we need resources. Lucian smiled. Already done. Morrison's setting up an office specifically for managing charitable requests and advocacy work. You planned this. I know you. The moment that article came out, I knew you'd want to help. He pulled her into his lap and she went willingly. You're going to change the world, Elena Viramont. Might as well give you the tools to do it properly. I love you. I know. I'm very lovable. You're impossible. That too. 5 years after the warehouse, Elena stood in the same spot where she'd first arrived. The entrance to the manor, rain falling just like it had that first night. But everything else was different. The manor itself had been transformed. Light instead of darkness. Open doors instead of locked rooms. People coming and going, staff, business partners, women from the advocacy program, children from the orphanage visiting for holiday parties. A home instead of a prison. Lucian found her there, standing in the rain with a smile on her face. What are you doing out here? Remembering. Remembering what? How much I hated this place when I first saw it. How I was so angry and scared and determined not to let you break me. Elena turned to face him, and how wrong I was about almost everything. You weren't wrong about me being insufferable. True. You were terrible. And yet you married me anyway. I didn't have a choice. You do now. Lucien took her hand and his expression was serious. We could dissolve the marriage. Legally, financially, you're protected. You have your own wealth, your own influence. You don't need me anymore. Elena stared at him. Are you asking me to leave? I'm asking if you want to stay. Not because a contract says you have to. Not because you're trapped, but because you choose to. For a moment, Elena didn't speak. She just looked at this man who'd terrified her, challenged her, fought beside her, loved her. This man who'd been honest about his darkness and was learning, slowly, to live in the light. I choose to stay, she said firmly. I choose you. Every day for the rest of my life, I choose you. The relief in his expression was worth everything. Good, because I spent 3 months having Morrison draw up new marriage contracts that actually reflect our partnership, and it would be very awkward if you said no. New contracts? He pulled papers from his coat. Equal ownership of all properties and businesses, joint decision-making authority, explicit provisions that you're a partner, not property. He handed them to her. You should read them, obviously. Have your own lawyer review them. But I needed you to know that I see you, not as the woman I bought, but as the person you are. Elena read through the contracts with tears blurring her vision. He'd thought of everything: protections for her independence, guarantees of her authority, provisions that ensured she could never be reduced to property again. "These are perfect," she whispered. "So you'll sign?" "On one condition." "What?" "We get married again, properly this time. Not a business arrangement. A real wedding, with our actual vows, choosing each other freely." Lucian pulled her close, and his voice was rough with emotion. "Yes. Absolutely yes." They held the second wedding 6 months later in the orphanage garden, surrounded by the people who'd become their real family. Margaret stood as Elena's witness. Morrison stood as Lucienne's. The children from St. Catherine's threw flowers. Mrs. Godfrey cried openly. And when the officiant asked if Elena took Lucian as her husband, she looked at the man who'd bought her and found her and loved her and said, "I do. Not because I have to, because I want to." When Lucienne kissed her, the crowd erupted in cheers, and Elena felt the last chains of that first arranged marriage finally break. This was real. This was chosen. This was love. 10 years after the warehouse, Elena Viramont stood on the balcony of the manor and looked out at the empire they'd built together. The port bustled with ships bearing their colors. The orphanage network had expanded to 12 cities. The advocacy program had helped hundreds of women escape bad situations and build new lives. And inside the manor, in the nursery they'd added 3 years ago, their daughter slept peacefully under the watchful eye of Annie's younger sister, who they'd hired specifically to honor the girl who died protecting them. Lucien appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Caroline wants another interview. Something about the 10th anniversary of the Duchess who broke the rules." "Tell her maybe next month. I'm busy." "Doing what?" "Appreciating this. Us. Everything we built." Elena leaned back against him. "Do you ever think about how it started? How angry we both were?" "Sometimes. Usually when you're rearranging furniture without telling me. That was one time. It was last week. Fine. Twice." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the grounds, and Elena thought about the girl who'd arrived in the rain, desperate, defiant, determined not to be owned. She'd succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. Not because she'd escaped, not because she'd run away or fought for freedom in the traditional sense, but because she'd stood her ground, because she'd refused to be diminished, because she'd looked at a man who thought he'd bought her and said, "You don't own me, but maybe we can own this together." And they had. "I love you," Lucian said quietly. "I know. You tell me every day." "Good. I'll tell you tomorrow, too." "Promise?" "Promise." Inside the manor, their daughter started crying. Elena turned to go comfort her, but Lucian stopped her with a gentle hand. "I'll get her. You stay here. Enjoy the sunset." He kissed her softly and disappeared inside, and Elena stood alone on the balcony, mistress of her own life, architect of her own future, living proof that sometimes the worst beginnings led to the best endings. She'd been sold to save a name she never wanted, and she'd turned those chains into a crown, not through submission, not through silence, but through sheer stubborn refusal to be anything less than exactly who she was. The transaction had become an empire. The bargain had become a love story. And Elena Harrow Viramont, the Duchess who broke all the rules, smiled at the gathering darkness and knew with absolute certainty that she'd won. Not just survival, not just freedom, but something far more valuable, the right to choose her own story and write her own ending. And what an ending it was.